Sailors, today we're going to talk about conflict.
So we are going to go over 5 different types of conflict, and those are man versus self, man versus man, man versus society, man versus nature, and man versus technology. Let's start with man versus self.
So, when we're talking about man versus self, this is when a character struggles to overcome a fear, perhaps addiction, emotional issue, or some kind of personal crossroads in their life. This type of conflict can be indirectly shared by other characters as supporters or simply as a witness. Internal conflicts includes troubles with decision making, personality traits, spirituality, or physical disabilities. So when we were talking about in building your hero's journey, some of your conflicts could be internal instead of external. This is where the internal conflicts come in. So in your notebook, please define this conflict type, give an example of this conflict happening in the Outsiders, and then explain how you might use this type of conflict in your original hero's journey. And even if it's not the central conflict, there should be at least some sort of internal conflict that the hero struggles with.
A good place for this might be when your hero first has to decide whether they're going to actually leave to go on this adventure. There's a point there after the call to adventure where they decide they're actually going to go, and oftentimes that's a good place for an internal conflict.
Yeah, a lot of heroes' journeys include what's called the refusal of the call, where the initial call to adventure, the hero responds by saying, "But I don't want to. I'm normal. That's scary. I would rather not do that and be a hero."
And moving on to man versus man. So in this conflict, it's usually the protagonist dealing with the antagonist, and the antagonist provides some form of conflict against the protagonist, and the conflict can be physical or mentally stressful. So this could be like a fight, or an argument, or a competition.
Yeah, when it's listing as man versus man too, you don't necessarily have to keep it to like other like actual people. Like when we're talking about our Marvel movies, they exist almost exclusively in this space for their central conflicts. There's lots of internal conflicts in like the big superhero movies that have been popular lately, but when we're talking about the big central conflicts and the big final battles, that's where we see a man versus man at play. So, make sure you pause the video now and do all that work in your notebook.
All right, then we have man versus society. And in this, the protagonist battles against an unjust form of government, culture, possibly a holiday, or any society based group. It could be man versus church.
So, in your notebook, make sure you define this conflict type. Again, give us an example from the Outsiders and explain how you might use this type of conflict in your hero's journey. Pause the video now and add to this, and keep in mind when we're talking about society, we're talking about any larger structure in society. It could just be the feeling that like society is judging our protagonist or looking down on them. That alone creates a man versus society conflict. So next we have man versus nature. This type of conflict portrays a story's main character or characters against a natural force, such as a natural disaster, a fire, an aggressive animal, illness, or environmental issues. So, like the tsunami in Japan that we faced recently, the earthquake in Haiti a while ago, Hurricane Katrina back in the early 2000s, the BP oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico are all examples of kind of forces of nature or larger scale natural disasters that occurred. Even though like the BP oil spill is fueled in a lot of ways by like actual people, there still was a lot of natural elements at play in trying to control how it affected nature.
And moving on to man versus technology. This type of conflict portrays a story's main character or characters against a technological force, item, or entity. This could be robots, computers, some technological research, an AI, or any technology based dilemma.
So, the man versus technology conflict really truly is any technology. The most obvious form of this is the common story of, the future set story where an artificial intelligence goes rogue and decides to kill all of humanity. Is the most common version of this, but there's lots of other versions that have smaller deals of technology. Even if it's just your protagonist, sometimes has a problem with their car not working. That could be a small case man versus technology conflict.
Those of you that are having time travel stories, this might be an interesting thing to include, especially if you're traveling forward in time and they're having to learn new technology, or if they're traveling backwards in time and they're having to learn old technology they've never seen before.
So go ahead and pause the video now and in your notebook define this conflict type and give an example from the Outsiders, which I promise does exist, and explain how you might use this type of conflict in your original hero's journey.
That's it.
That said, get to work, sailors!